Hey everyone, welcome back to the Will and Cody Show. This is part 2 of our series going through how to teach your kids about money. So if you haven't already listened to part 1, make sure you go back and listen to that and then come back to this one as we're going to be continuing this. So Cody, let's jump right back in with what we were talking about last time. And the next thing kind of wanted to cover is how to teach kids about budgeting. And so I know there's a lot of different budgeting tools and as well different strategies that we could use. But how do you relate that to a kid's level on, the income that we talked about in the last episode? If they're kind of managing this flow of money, how could they kind of learn some of these basic budgeting principles?
Yeah. So one of the things that my parents did when I was really young was, and I believe it was I think it came from like Larry Burkett's own ministry or something like that, but it was just a bank and it had 3 different slots. It had one for like giving, savings, and then like personal stuff. But some of the things that I've seen, it was a really cool, like just piggy bank, but it had like multiple slots. But other things I've seen is like jars or just different kinds of piggy banks. You always see a kid with one piggy bank, but in my opinion, they should have multiple ones and then label them with each thing. So for really young kids, I would definitely look at doing that. Just kind of like saying, hey, this is for a certain goal, kind of like an envelope system, kind of starting them off really young. And just say, hey, this is for this small thing. This is for savings. This is for giving, and eventually as they get older, it'd be like, certain expenses they may have, things like that. But I think that'd be a really good start, is just kind of quickly showing the idea of budgeting. And I think that should start the moment they get an allowance. Once that they get, whatever age you decide an allowance is, maybe it's like $1. I would say, okay, hey, 10 cents maybe to giving, and then, maybe 50 cents to savings. And then here you got this 40 cents. Well, what are maybe some expenses? You can maybe come up with an expense if you wanted, or say, hey, mom's got a birthday coming up. Don't you want to save up for that? Put that over here, and just kind of teach that idea of, hey, we need to put our money into certain boxes, certain things, so that way we can put our money to work for us. And the one thing that trips us up as adults is not letting our money work for us. And so, we all struggle with this. So starting really early at a young age, saying, instead of a kid getting their allowance and saying $1 and saying, sweet, I can go buy a Snickers bar, they need to think, oh, I've got other things I've got to take care of. I got to go put this over in certain places. And I think that's just a really good idea to start out, is that budgeting. But as they get older, as into, their middle school days or something like that, you could probably start looking at an app, if their allowance is a little bit more. There's a lot of apps out there. But then just write it down, if they open up a bank account, the bank might have it as well. They may get them a statement, some stuff like that. And so writing it down is a good way, but then even opening up an app. But I would just sit down. There's really no age, I guess, for this, except which is whenever you decide to start an allowance for your kids. Just sit down with them and explain, why we take money and why we put them into certain places, whether it's an envelope, it's a jar, it's a certain bank account, like what I had as a kid, with just little different things. It even had like a church for the giving, it had like a bank for the savings, then it had like a shop for the personal stuff. And that's what I did at like 4 years old. So, I don't know. What do you think? That's kind of what I did as a kid.
Yeah, I think I had the same one. I didn't really use it a ton, but I think I had the exact same bank. I think it's good, at any age to start with those principles, as you mentioned. I think the main thing is, whenever a kid starts to have income, that's really when you need to decide it. So if they're working a job, or maybe you decided to do an allowance or kind of a chore-based income for them, whatever you decide for that, once that kid has that income coming in, that's when you really need to start teaching this budgeting. So I think, that's kind of the time frame, because if a kid doesn't have income, it maybe is a little harder for them to grasp the concepts that you're trying to teach. So I think if they could get hands-on experience of whenever they actually have money coming in, as little or much of it as it is, that would be a good time to transition and start teaching these things. And the percentages may be much different than you as an adult in your budget. Kid's going to have a lot less expenses and more things that they may want to just spend their money on that are just kind of for fun or just for them. So I think, less about trying to make them, for sure on percentages and more on the principle of them telling their money what to do. Instead of just getting money and not knowing what to do with it, or it's sitting in a drawer somewhere, what is that money for? And so getting this in that habit of, all right, I made $1. What am I going to do with it? And then I think that's fine, whatever the kid decides, as far as, if they want to spend it right now, if they want to maybe save most of it for later, but at least getting them in the habit of, all right, I made income. What am I going to do with it? And then them telling their money what to do rather than just the money kind of flowing where it wants to. So I think that would be kind of the key principle I would want to focus on in budgeting is them telling their money what to do. So you're planning it out. If you want to do that by percentages, or if you just want to let your kid choose, or if you want to do like a zero-based budget where it's like, okay, I got $1. How are you separating it out? Are you doing 10 cents here, 20 cents there, whatever it is to make up the allocation for the dollar. You could do it that way. But I think that would be the main point I would try to emphasize is the kid is, you're just teaching them, okay, you are the one telling your money where to go. And so I think as a part of that, we can group in, topics that's like saving. And as you mentioned, if we want to start investing a little bit and giving, I think those are areas where you could easily add that in if you want to do it as a percentage. So if you wanted to say, I'm just throwing out numbers here, if you wanted to even enforce that your kid was giving 10%, I think that would be reasonable. And I think you could expect that and walk them along that process of whatever they're making. All right, let's take 10% and let's give it. And then, saving. I think, that could be reasonable as well. If you wanted to do 10, 20% or whatever, amount you wanted to help your kids, set up and just say that's set aside for later. And then maybe let them decide what to do with the rest. If they want to spend it right away, or if they want to maybe save it up and buy something bigger. Or as you mentioned, maybe they want to buy somebody a gift. That could be things that they would allocate that money toward. So I would say those would be the two things with budgeting is deciding where the money's going to go and then starting to teach giving and saving and just making that a regular habit of money comes in. What are you going to do with it? You should probably save some and give some out of every, dollar that, comes in. Right. So that would be kind of my thoughts. Any additional thoughts on that?
Yeah. I mean, the whole goal of this, and adults do this, and this is one of the biggest problems in America, is we get a paycheck and we look at it and we think of all the things we could buy with it.
Right.
And what we want to do is we want to teach, hey, that paycheck is income, but we have goals, we have plans, and that plan is called a budget. And so instead of looking at what the paycheck is, we're looking at what the actual numbers are, what the percentages are, whatever we decide, whatever our plan was, and we stick to that. So instead of saying, oh my goodness, I'm getting, $500 this week, I can go buy an Xbox. That's not a good idea, right? Because, you needed to save for that. You need a budget for that. You've got other expenses, things like that. And so we want the kids to see that. And a good way to do that is by starting whenever there's an income, no matter what it is. If it's no matter how small it is, when they're like 4 or 5 years old, whenever you decide, whenever there's an income, there needs to be a point where they say, oh, just because this is income doesn't mean I get to spend it all. There's rules here. And those rules are there's savings, there's, personal like things that they may want to buy. And then, giving, things like that. And that's important, I think for kids to see giving. I think that's a good habit to build at a young age. But the whole goal is for them to just see that their paycheck is not something that they can just spend, right? This is something that we want them to get into adulthood, and starting really, really early, I think is super important. And then going into that with the savings and giving, I think one thing that we should do is give them a big goal for the savings. Something my parents did was they gave me a very large goal, like something that was kind of not even achievable at the age I was at, but would be achievable when I was a teenager. It was like a car, right? Or maybe it was, my dad said, hey son, you need to get your your hunter's license, because him and I like to go hunting a lot. And when you turn 16, you need to have a license, and it costs a good bit. My dad's like, when you turn 16, you need to buy that. It's like, oh, okay. And then there was some other things like, hey, to be able to open up a bank account, you need to have this certain amount of money to be able to open up that account. And so these were like goals that I had as a kid. And I'm like, wow, these are crazy big goals. And I'm never going to achieve them. Well, guess what? I did achieve them through the process. Yeah. And what that's doing is showing that just because something looks unachievable, if you trust the process, you'll get there. I'm in a similar boat. I go look at a $250,000 house. I'm like, wow, that's insane. I'll never get that. Right. But if I keep following the system, it'll work out, right? That's kind of the thing you want to do. So I wouldn't say just save. I would say save with a purpose. Maybe have 2 savings accounts, maybe one for whatever they want to buy. I had one for a lightsaber when Revenge of the Sith came out. And then I had the other one, which was for like a car. And then also had the giving portion. I'll let you cover giving. But yeah, I definitely think putting a goal in mind for savings is going to help your kids kind of see that things can be achievable, things that may seem to them out of reach, but over time they'll be able to get there.
Yeah, I think that's great too. Because I think sometimes, especially kids are like, well, if I spend it now, it's not going to be as great. But teaching them that you could spend later or save later and show how, just setting aside a little bit at a time can really grow. And kind of that, being able to hit those goals would be huge. It's a huge motivator for a kid to be like, wow, I reached that goal. It's awesome. And then the counterpoint that I'll also make too is like, you could also teach your kids to enjoy money. Like it's totally fine. Like it's just a tool. So, teach them like, hey, if you've saved for this or it's okay, feel free to spend it. Enjoy, whatever you can buy and enjoy your, if you've worked for it, you can enjoy the fruits of that. So I would discourage from saying that not letting your kids spend anything of what they've earned. But I think in reason, that could be also a good principle of like, hey, if I worked really hard and I got to enjoy this, but not to your point, not just get in the habit of whatever I make, I'm spending. Right. Kind of having that buffer first of, okay, make sure the priorities are taken care of. And then you can do what you want. It's kind of, that's one of the awesome parts of budgeting. It's you can tell your money where to go and you could spend it on what you want after the kind of the main things are taken care of. Right. To your point about giving, for us and for a lot of people, the baseline we've said is 10% that we're going to give. And I think that's good to implement for a kid as well, if you want to get them in that habit. But if not, I still think giving is a good part of it because it teaches them to think about more than just themselves. And so that could be a really great lesson for kids also to learn of, yes, I worked hard and I got this money, but also I can use that effort to maybe help those that aren't as fortunate as me, as me. And so that could be a great thing as well, as instead of kids, because I know plenty of kids that, you grow up and once they get that little taste of like, I work hard and get money, it all becomes about how much can I get? Like, I want to just keep earning money. And so I think it's also helpful to implement a little portion of that of, okay, let's look around me. Who else is around me? Maybe there's opportunities to give. So just implementing that a little bit will be helpful. And then also seeing that, to your point about saving, the impact that their giving could have. So I think that could also be a good principle to teach, like, hey, this person was struggling, but you were able to give them this gift and look how much it impacted them. So to see that firsthand instead of maybe just kind of just sending the money off and them not knowing what happens to it, you just kind of just tell them what to do. I think also making it personal and saying, hey, you gave to this and look what had happened. Right. That can, help motivate kids to do that as well. So these are big lessons and you can teach them at pretty, very young age. With just a little bit, you can teach them the power of, man, we were able to help out, this other family, or you gave that gift to that kid of some candy or something and look, how much it helped them. And so I think that helps kids as well. Not just become so inward focused, but instead you're focused on like, yes, you want to work hard and earn some money, but who else around you can you benefit? And could you help out? And so I think that helps rather than just constantly be worried about making more, and then you don't really get to enjoy it or be able to help others. So that's what I'd say. I mean, we would say a baseline of at least 10%, but whatever you would feel is reasonable for your kids, and whatever they'd want to give. But I just think a giving should be a part of that. I think it's helpful for kids rather than just being selfish and just focus on whatever they can get. Implement a little bit of giving. I think it'll go a long way.
Yeah, absolutely. The next point was start paying for their own things. And that's kind of still going in with the savings, giving, and budgeting. These are kind of layering. The reason we want them to start paying for things, and this is kind of as they get older, you don't want like your 4-year-old having to like pay rent.
Right.
But as they get older, like there needs to be a little bit of a, hey, you can achieve the same stuff. Like mom and dad can give you, your gift or take care of you and do everything, or we can give you some money. And then in turn, you can kind of take care of yourself. And we're trying to slowly build a form of independence. And so if you start letting them pay for certain things, let's say, well, for me personally, as I got into like middle school, my parents stopped buying, just say things that were like toys or just fun stuff, maybe like events, like going to, I think it was like Chuck E. Cheese or something like that. A couple places. Maybe even like Six Flags, and they would say, okay, use your allowance, use the money that you're making from, mowing lawns and stuff like that. And then you can pay for that. You have the opportunity, you have the tools to be able to achieve the same stuff that we used to take care of, but now you get to take care of that. And so they would slowly start showing up things that I had to take care of. And as I got older into my teenage years, it was the car. I had to buy a car. And then it would be like, okay, we'll pay for the gas to get to school, but if you want to go to your friend's house, you have to pay for that gas. And then it just slowly kept going and going and going until a point where now I'm fully independent of my parents, right?
Right.
So it's kind of the idea is you want to slowly find ways that not overburden them, but slowly find ways of things that they could maybe potentially pay for. One of the first things my parents did was let us pay for when we went out to eat. And I think I mentioned this in the last podcast a little bit, but I'll just kind of mention it again. That's one really good way. It's like, hey, maybe it's like maybe it's a really small kid, let's say like 4 or 5 years old. They've got $1 or $2. Well, maybe you don't want to make them pay for the meal, right? $1 or $2 isn't going to do much. But then they could say, hey, Dad, I want an ice cream. Okay, honey, maybe we'll go get one. But didn't you save up for something like that? I did. And then let them buy an ice cream. So there was one little thing, maybe it's dessert, maybe it's the one little thing that you took away that you normally would take care of. And now they get to take care of it. And you want to just slowly do that over time. Right. So I think that's a really important thing to build independence. I don't know what your thoughts are on that, but.
Yeah. And I would say, start with things that are extras, kind of those bonus things. Like obviously you want your kid to eat. So if your kid can't afford it, I would say, at least make sure there's food at home, that they can eat. Like, don't be extreme with it. But little extra things, like one thing that just came to mind when you were saying that, of like as a kid, we would always want to get a soda when we went out to a restaurant, right? But we probably just needed water. Water's fine. So maybe, for a young kid, soda's not that much. To say, hey, if you want a soda, you could pay for it. Or if you just want water, it's free. And so I think it could, just be a good idea. As you start to give them things that they're paying for themselves, they see like that hurt a little bit of like, ouch, that hurts spending money. It's not as fun. Like this is my money. I wanted to spend it on something else. So it's like, okay, if I would rather get a toy than drinks, have a soda at a restaurant, then I have the opportunity to make that choice of I'm going to get the water instead so I can go get the toy. And so starting to help them make that connection, I think can be, really huge. And so, this is kind of I'm jumping ahead a little bit on what we wanted to cover, Cody, but another thing in that is opportunity costs of like, hey, I wanted this thing, but if I spend it over here, I can't have that thing. And so that's one thing that can come along with it. And then as they get older, adding in more expenses. And then, I think as is reasonable with their budget, if you look at their budget and they've got, a few bucks a month that they have free, maybe you don't want to burden them with, a lot of expenses. Or you showing them that, I think one thing, you mentioned is like toys and just extra things other than like birthdays or Christmas or whatever you celebrate. Maybe don't buy them those kind of things and teach them instead, here's how we save up and buy those things. If you want it. So I would start with extra things. So things that aren't your bare necessities. And then slowly implement things like as they get a job. Okay, let's look at insurance and gas and car and things like that where they could start paying. And then later on phone and, there's a lot of different opportunities to implement that. But I think real young, you just start with the extras. So as you mentioned, ice cream or a soda when you go out, those are very reasonable things. And then again, starting to teach them about opportunity costs of, okay, if you spend it on this, you can't spend it on that.
Right.
If you spend, going back to budgeting, if you spend the money now, you can't save up and buy the bigger thing later that you want. So, teaching them that, like, you can buy something for 50 cents or you could save it and buy something bigger for $1.
Right.
Trying to teach them that principle as well. So that would be what I would add. Yeah, to that.
Yeah. I'm so glad you mentioned soda because that was a big deal as a kid.
That was a big deal. It was.
And, but I drink water specifically for that reason now, because my parents would say, oh, you want a soda? Well, this is what we're providing here at this restaurant. And if you want this, you gotta give me whatever extra it is. And we started drinking water. I've drank water ever since. I don't think I've ordered a soda at a restaurant in years. So very healthy habit there. But my parents would do like, if they would say, hey, we'll provide this amount. They gave us like a dollar limit when I was really young. And they'd be like, okay, you can get something. It would always be something that's like on the kids menu or something, relatively cheap, something that, you would order for your kids. But if you wanted something extra, if you wanted like the big burger or something like that, you had to show that money. You had to, pay the little bit extra. But over time, as we got older, it was like, hey, there's food in the house. Like there's stuff in the fridge. You can make yourself a PB&J. If you want to go to Longhorns with us, show me the money. Like, because we were working, Yeah. So that's a really good, and I look back at that. At first I'd be like, come on, guys, you got all the money. But now I look back at that, I'm like, that was a really good way to teach me, hey, this hurts. Right. Spending money hurts.
Spending money hurts.
And I really don't need that. Try to save to go on a trip and, $10 at a restaurant, that $10 can go a long way. So yeah, definitely. That's a big deal. But you mentioned opportunity cost. I mean, that's basically what that is. That's, that's looking at, I can have a little bit of enjoyment now. I can buy a little bit extra. I can get a double cheeseburger or I can get a soda. Or if I stop getting sodas and I stop doing this and I just take what my parents provide and I save that money over time, I can get something nicer, and I can remember things like saving up for a lightsaber, saving up for a video game, eventually saving up to build my first computer, just all of these things. And it starts at a young age. And that's a big deal as opportunity cost. And something that I think a lot of adults tend to forget is if we push away, instant gratification and we look towards the future a little bit and we plan, we'll see things that we can then afford that have more value. Yeah.
I would say, it goes hand in hand for me with opportunity cost is delayed gratification. Starting to teach them that principle because I think it affects us as we get older. And basically what I mean by that is you have things that you want to achieve, right? Your big things that you want to get done. A lot of times it's not, I'm trying to figure out how to describe this. It's usually the small things that keep us from achieving our big goals oftentimes. Right. So this is a big principle. And so you got to teach it at a very small level to a kid. But as I'm trying to describe it now, if you just kind of spend a little bit here or there and don't control it, you'll find you're not going to achieve the big things that you want. So just having a little bit of focus of saying, I'm going to say no to that because I've got a big yes that I want later. I want this goal or I have this thing I want to do. which makes it so much easier to say no to the little things. And if you've got room for the little things, I think they're completely fine. Like we joke around about this in finance all the time about the Starbucks coffee, right? It's the typical punching bag of if you just didn't go to Starbucks, whatever, then you could do this. But I think if you have room in your budget, it's totally fine. But if it's going to cost you your end goal, then it's not worth it. But I think so many times we forget that perspective, or maybe we don't even have an end goal that we want. So I think getting that in your kid's mind of, okay, what do you want to do? Big picture. Do you want, as if they're really young, do you want that nice toy? Do you want to maybe go out to eat a few times? Or what things do you want to save or give? And then it helps them see the opportunity cost of, well, if I do this, I'm not going to be as close to reaching my goal. And so seeing those trade-offs, I think could be a helpful thing for kids to see, because then they'll realize, man, if I just keep, in our example, if I keep getting soda when we go out, I'm not going to be able to get that toy that I want. And so, man, that's a very easy. I would rather have the toy than a soda. So let's not spend that, instead save for the toy. So I think it's a big principle as far as delayed gratification, but it still affects us as adults. Like we still fall prey, to that same type of thinking. So if you can start implementing that as a young age, it sounds like, your parents started with you guys of like, man, it hurts spending money. So I'd rather spend it on the things I want than just kind of, I guess I like that. So I want to spend it on the things I really want. And so having that focus, I think could be a big, helpful thing for kids.
Absolutely. Yeah. It's human nature, that instant gratification. So that's just something you want to kind of get at a young age. It'll really help them in the future. Yeah. But one of the last things we wanted to mention was, this is kind of, it's not really later in their lives. I mean, you could start this pretty early. It's the typical lemonade stand, but just turning hobbies into side hustles, a little bit of entrepreneurship. This is more of a, hey, I have a goal and I have maybe an allowance, or I have certain things, or maybe I don't have an allowance and I want to achieve some goals. Then how do I make that happen? And this is where the parents really have to help sometimes. My parents helped me a couple of times. They would, I remember my dad talking to a neighbor, the neighbor came up to my dad and he was like, hey, I need somebody to mow my lawn. And my dad's like, okay, well, I have a son. And I remember my dad kind of setting that up for me. And then he goes over there and goes, okay, here's an opportunity. Go make it happen. And from there, my allowance ended, because then I had a job. It was like $50 a month. And it was pretty good money back then.
Yeah.
And so stuff like that. Entrepreneurship, this idea of, hey, let's make it happen. Let's figure out a way to bring in that extra income. And it also can help with just basic, financial stuff, kind of giving your kids this idea of building a business, or just even handling personal finance. Business and personal finance go hand in hand sometimes. And sometimes seeing it in a different light of ins and outs and making trades and deals can help you along with your personal finances, kind of open up and show a different side of things. So that's definitely a great idea. And sometimes it can also show your kids that, hey, some things don't work out. When you do the lemonade stand and nobody shows up, like, I'm sure you could make that a teaching moment too. Yeah. Or you could go call some of your family and say, hey, can you come buy some lemonade, please, so my kid doesn't cry? So, but I think it's a great opportunity. I think it's something that every parent should try to. Maybe the kids don't make a lot of money, but maybe they should still try. One thing my parents did was yard sales. And we would do a yard sale probably like every year, maybe even twice a year. And my parents would let us have kind of our own section. And we would kind of clear out the toys, clear out everything, and then do the deals, make the negotiations ourselves, trying to sell stuff. And then sometimes we got pretty smart. If it was a neighborhood, we would go early. We would go find, because we had the house at the front. There's the deal. We had the house at the front of the neighborhood. And so we would go early and we would check out other yard sales, and we would buy things and we would try to resell them. And I remember reselling a golf club, or a bunch of golf clubs as a teenager for like $30 more than what I had paid for. And I also got stuck with a skateboard that didn't sell, but there's that. So a lot of life lessons you can learn from that. But I think putting that kind of idea, it'll just kind of help see if the kids maybe has an entrepreneurial mindset.
Yeah.
Maybe they don't, but this is a good way to find out, is kind of put them in a situation of, hey, let's go try to sell something, or hey, let's go try to, detail some cars, or maybe go mow some lawns, and kind of help them set it up and just see if it's something that maybe works out for them.
Yeah. And I think it's really problem solving, right? It's okay with money, what do you want to do? How can you make it happen? And then seeing opportunities out there. Like you mentioned, like I did the same thing with the yard sale of, okay, I don't want these toys anymore. All right, let's sell them. Oh, I could see that. All right. If I sell that, I got some more money. I can do what I want. Reselling, things like that, working, mowing lawns, washing cars, lemonade stand. All those things are great learning experiences for kids to see how money works and how you can problem solve with that. And you can find opportunities just in everyday life. You can find opportunities to make a little money. And so I think if, just teaching your kids to think that way of looking for those opportunities can be really helpful. And then if the kid hates it, all right, well, I guess they, maybe aren't as entrepreneurial, but then if you might have a kid that really likes that and is really good at thinking that way. And so it may spark a passion in that. And then the other thing, you don't have to monetize everything. So if a kid has a hobby or something that they really enjoy, it doesn't have to be about money, but it could be a good opportunity if you want to make it that way. So, an example of like, if a kid likes doing art, let's say, likes painting or drawing, if they want to just paint and draw, that is perfectly fine. But if they wanted to turn that into a way to make money, you could help them with that process of like, all right, let's do maybe some custom artwork and sell it or things like that. So not everything has to be about money, but if they're looking to make some extra money, you can help kind of bridge that gap between, hey, here's something you already enjoy and you're already doing, and you can just change it just a little bit. And here's how you could make some money doing it at the same time, the thing that you enjoy. But if they just want to keep doing it for fun, I think that's perfectly fine. But if you wanted to help them with that, it can, help them get ahead a little bit. So just see those opportunities of, hey, I'm already doing this. So if I wanted to make some extra money, the opportunity's there.
Right. Yeah, I think you're right. And we do that. I do that now. If there's some goal that I need to meet or something like that, looking at potential things to sell. We talk about that all the time, things to maybe go get a second job, something like that to help meet that goal. Maybe some need comes up. And so you want to start that early. I think that's a great idea is show problem solving. When the kid's just sitting there stuck and it's like, I don't know how to fix the situation, say, hey, what are some abilities? What are some things that we can do? I'm glad you mentioned artwork. I know some kids that love drawing, and they did an art gallery and sold several dollars worth of art. That was really inspiring. And nowadays, like, kids are crazy. Like, we talk about like mowing lawns. I mean, there's kids that are like coding and editing videos and doing YouTube and all this stuff that like blows my mind. So, we may need some of their help. Right.
Right.
And, so, there's a lot of opportunity, way more than we had as kids. So definitely look at and see. You don't want to monetize everything. I mean, I've got hobbies that I don't want monetized. Right. But definitely look at it, see if it's something that they could make money on. And hey, who knows, you may spark something that you didn't know was there.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. And then the kind of the last point that I'll make, I don't know if you have any other thoughts as we get close to time, Cody, is also include your kids on a small part of your process. I think that could be a helpful thing. You obviously don't want to show them exact numbers, but include them a little bit. And I appreciated when my parents did this growing up. They didn't do it a lot. But when there was opportunity, including them in the thought process of, hey, we got a little extra money, trying to decide what we should do with it. We're thinking, hey, we want to go on this trip maybe next year, or we want to give to this family or things like that. And just seeing their thought process and how they worked through it and assigned, where they wanted the money to go. I never knew the numbers of it, but at least, being a part of that kind of brainstorming and them thinking it through, really helped me growing up, just getting the regular rhythm of how to think and how to kind of process that. So, you don't want to share too much of your, as you're comfortable with your kids. But I think including them just in that process of how do we think about giving? How do we think about saving and investing? How do we think about spending? You can easily just rope them in to a little part of your process and get those lessons in it that way as well. So it's like you have the instruction part where you're teaching your kids, where you're just telling them what to do. You've also got the part where they watch you, they see the example that you're setting. And then the third phase is kind of where they get to implement it themselves. And so I think all three aspects of that are important. So they, you need to tell them the principle or what you're trying to teach. You need to model it for them and show them this is how we think about it. And then lastly, give them some hands-on experience where they can really handle some money and see how it works and see how it can work for them.
Yeah, no, that's really good. I mean, getting them involved in it may feel like, you may not want to give a lot of personal information. You may not want to tell them, everything. But I remember, sometimes that there'd be some hard times because Dad owned his own business. And so there could be seasons of, hey, money's a little tight. And we would be told that my parents would communicate that to us and say, hey, allowances are going to be down. We're not going to be able to eat out as much. We're going to need to save some money. Hey, if we want to make this goal, we're going to need to work together. And I can remember going to the grocery store and trying to help Mom find deals, cutting out coupons, trying to figure out things, trying to problem solve with the parents as a collective, trying to solve this problem. And I remember being included in that. My wife has told me that before, that, her dad would tell her, he owned a business as well, and he would tell her, hey, guys, we're not going to be able to do as much as we used to. And here's the reason why. There's impacts to the economy, or there's impacts to, this certain season of life. And so we need to work together to figure out a way to overcome this. And, don't scare them. Don't tell them, hey, we're all screwed. But, tell them, hey, life isn't, rainbows and sunshine. Right. So, we need to work together, and here's how we're doing it. And then you guys can be involved in it. So I think that's a really good idea. Yeah. But back to your point, we can tell them as much as we want. We can beg them to apply it. But if we don't apply it and they see us not applying it, chances are it's not going to work out for them. Yeah. So definitely want to make sure your finances are in order, and then they see that, it's hard to follow something that somebody's telling you're trying to apply yourself, but you don't see them doing it. So definitely want to keep that in mind as well. But yeah, to your point, I mean, it's a great idea to have them included, and then make sure they see that process at least have them sit down every once in a while with the budget meeting. Maybe they don't have to see the numbers, but they could say, hey, we're giving to this family this day. Hey, we've got a vacation coming up. We need to allot some time for that, or some money for that. Because of that, we're going to have to not go out to eat so much. We're going to have to cut down on this budget. So, no Pop-Tarts, guys, stuff like that. So they can see why, there's costs to things. There's these decisions. There's all these things going on, opportunity cost, everything. They need to see that. And I think that's a really great way for them to see that. Yeah, no, totally agree. So I think we're about time. And I think, again, we had a lot we wanted to cover. And so I think we hopefully covered everything. We'll see if there's a part 3. But thank you all for tuning in, and feel free to shoot us if you got questions, or maybe some thoughts that maybe sparked maybe additional points you thought we could have made. Feel free to reach out to us. Again, it's willandcody.com, or reach out to us on social. Feel free to ask us questions. That way, we appreciate your feedback, positive or negative. And so we just like interacting with all of you. So thank you so much for listening, and feel free to reach out. Cody, any last thoughts? No, maybe there'll be a part 3. We'll see if we got some questions. So send us some questions. If we get questions, we'll see if there's a part 3. But I think that'll be it. So anyway, thanks, guys. All right, we'll see you guys.